Bob Woodward is the author of a brand new book that has all of Washington talking, which is usual practice. It's called The Price of Politics, and it takes you, the reader, behind closed doors into the negotiating rooms of the Capitol and the White House, and it exposes how the president tried but ultimately failed to restore the American economy. Now, this book raises some very serious questions about the president's ability to look beyond politics and lead the nation during times of great consequence. And here to talk about that and much more is the man himself, the author of The Price of Politics, available in bookstores everywhere, associate editor of The Washington Post. Bob Woodward is back. How are you? Good to see you.
Thank you.
I read the book cover to cover. I want every American to read it for this reason, and it should make everybody angry at the level of dysfunction at a time you say the American people never had any real knowledge of just how severe this was.
I mean, it was the kind of crisis that took the country's economy to the cliff. President Obama, when I interviewed him for the book, said they were days away from having $5 billion in the U.S. Treasury. That's it. Now, that's half a day's federal spending. If you think about it, to let that happen, not just the president, but the Republicans, could have sent shockwaves through the country, could have done things to the American economy that Tim Geithner, the Treasury Secretary, said would have been worse than the 1930s Depression.
I mean, it's so dysfunctional. It's far worse than we ever said. Here's what really bothers me in all of this. You know, we have 25 million and underemployed Americans right now. 1 in 6 Americans, Bob, in poverty. 49 million Americans on food stamps in this country. We're really, and nearly $6 trillion at the end of Obama's first term in new debt. This is not a game anymore. This is about as serious a crisis as I think we've faced since the Great Depression, and getting worse.
And this was last year, and they fixed it by postponing everything. No cuts, no tax increases, no sensible alignment of the federal budget. And so we are going to, in December or January, be back in the same mess. And the federal government is going to be in the position where there's no congressional authorization to pay its bills. Now, this, as you well know, this is a federal government that borrows $1 trillion a year. We have got, I mean, in the book, as you went through it, it's Tim Geithner, to his credit, who's running around saying, fire, we have got to fix this. We are going to do potentially something that will be indelible and last for generations. It's going to screw up everything. And when you get into the details, you realize that it could have been fixed. That, quite frankly, I think Bill Clinton or Ronald Reagan would have sat down and said, we can't let this happen.
Well, you go into detail in the book about that, how Ronald Reagan, remember, I don't know if you mentioned Tip O'Neill, but you talked about his liaisons to Congress. And both he and Bill Clinton on the phone late at night, they had relationships with members of Congress. That's right. Not the case with President Obama.
And it's not, you know, the White House was saying, oh, this is my conclusion. It's in the book. It's Larry Summers, who was the economic czar for Obama in the White House for the first 2 years. And Summers says Obama has no feeling for the game of politics, no sense of the joy of the game, and in fact does not like these people up in Congress. And so he's cut off. He's not got the sort of phone call relationship, personal relationship, where he can call somebody up and say, look, let's do this. Let's do a deal. It's in the larger interest of the whole country.
So on the brink, they were going to have, what, $5 billion in the Treasury, which is billion. That's not trillion. $5 billion. So we're basically out of money.
Yes, dry.
Yeah,
dry.
Done. Finished. Yeah. All right. So we're right up to the brink here. The president doesn't have a good relationship with Congress. Behind the scenes, you describe him meeting with the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, the Nicorette Merlot cigarette summit, whatever people.
Yes, because Boehner said, you know, here Obama is having iced tea and chewing Nicorettes, and of course Boehner's having a Merlot and a cigarette.
Right. All right. So, but they're trying to get this deal together, the two of them.
To their credit. To their credit.
I will agree with that.
Yes.
To their credit, except I wouldn't have liked it as a conservative because Boehner was agreeing to do something that the Tea Party would have had a fit about, which is raising, what, $800 billion in taxes, and then Obama comes back and wants $400 billion more at the last minute.
Yes, and of course Boehner's argument is that's $800 billion over 10 years in new revenue through tax reform, which of course is what Ronald Reagan did in 1986 and actually lowered the income tax rate down to 28%. It's hard, but it's been done, and it was one way to get out of this. But you're absolutely right. It's the president who comes in and says, oh, we need $400 billion more in some form, or his position is he offered it. Hey, John, please
at the last
take
minute,
this.
though.
Yeah, kind of at the last minute. And when you get into the nitty-gritty details, you wonder, well, why would he do that? He did it because 6 senators came out with a new plan, and David Plouffe, who is the senior political advisor in the White House, the man who was Obama's 2008 campaign manager, says, oh, wait a minute, this is a watershed moment. This will give Boehner more maneuvering room because some Republicans are calling for more revenue. And the congressional liaison in the White House tells the president, look, if you don't do this, you are going to be seen as the weakest president in all of mankind. Mm-hmm. And in that kind of environment, the president impulsively goes out, endorses the plan, and Boehner is trying to go ahead.
You know what infuriated me as all this is going on, as you describe it in the book? The president's fixation on one issue, that this can't come up again before the election. I actually think the one thing that might have helped if it did come up before the election, because it would be self-serving at that moment that they might have the pressure of getting something done. And I thought that bothered me, that he was thinking about electoral politics while we're on the brink of bankruptcy.
Well, that's one side of the argument. The other side of the argument is, can you imagine having this kind of a crisis in the middle of a presidential campaign?
It might get something done.
Well, but you know what happened last year, getting something done, was postponing everything to 2013. Yeah. They did nothing that was painful at the time.
And that's the story here for the American people. They didn't have the courage, the ability to navigate through these tough times, and they pushed it all up to 2013. And you know what the CBO is projecting? A very bad year next year.
A government-created recession.
It's the most predictable economic crisis we've ever had. You had fascinating insights about Paul Ryan from his earliest days in Congress. I'm going to ask you about that when we come back. We'll have more with Bob Woodward, and also we have the very latest breaking news out of Egypt tonight. Protesters storming the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. More on the dramatic pictures of this very volatile situation throughout the hour. Plus tonight, Dana Perino, Juan Williams, Karl Rove, and America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani.